I'm Justin Davis, and this is Drone Camps RC. Hey guys, welcome back to my Drone Camps channel. I'm Justin Davis, and today you're looking at the Helifar FUUTON 2. This is not the review drone for today, but this is actually the Patreon 2 giveaway for this month. There's like a week left, so it's a good time to get in on it. There's like 43 people on my Patreon so far supporting me of $1, $6 and $20 level, so super awesome that we're becoming crowdfunded. I just want to say thanks to the people that are supporting me for making my videos, and this is going to be a super sweet win. This is about $190. This one has been flown by me a few times. It's been set up, and it has an Frsky receiver on here bound up with my radio, but it will soon be bound up with some Patreon supporters radio, and they'll be ripping for the rest of the summer with this one. But the link is down below if you'd like to check that out and support me in making my videos. So now you're looking at the Stomer ST220, and what an upgrade from the original Stomer. This is a lot better than what I saw before. There are some pros and cons about this one. I'm going to do an honest review and let you guys know what I think about the cons versus the pros. There are more pros about this frame than cons, so that's good news for us. But right away we have pretty large motors on here. I believe those were 2306 motors, and the printing on them doesn't really look all that great. Let me just zoom into this so you guys can see this right here. R. Charlene branded motors, DT 2306, and those are 2400 kVs. See if I can get in just a little bit closer. The printing actually looked kind of scratchy on these motors, and I'm not sure why. Maybe they had sort of a bad run with the etching on the side of these motors, the bells. You can see that right there. But regardless of that, these are actually pretty powerful motors. You can run them on the stock props that came along with it. I'm trying right now the Gym Fan bi-blade props, and those are 5152s that I decided to put on there, mainly because I wanted to save my battery life. And with the stock props that come along with it, 5048 tri-props, they do have a pretty big sort of wide cord in the center, and I'm not really a huge fan of a lot of these stock props, so a lot of times I just kind of toss these to the side, and you do a lot less tuning for your quad when you have a really nice prop. Now this is super impressive, by the way. I am able to run this on 4-6S. So this does have 40 amp BL Heli 32 ESCs. They're running D-Shot 600 all the way up to 1200, and no problems with power on this quad. And another nice thing about this quad is it does have an all-in-one stack right here with that R. Charlene style VTX on the top of it. That runs from 25 to 800 milliwatt on that. So on my experiences running 800 milliwatt, you can get out there a couple miles. It's actually kind of nice. Now on the top of this frame, you also do see that we have recessed hardware. So that's also kind of a trend right now. The top plate is around 3 millimeters, and there's 4 screws on top holding that down. So it's a nice and easy to access stack, and it's also cut a little bit thin in the center to shave off a little bit of weight for this frame. Another nice thing about this design is it does have braiding over top of the motor wires going from the ESCs to each motor. Now I did take one single zip tie and put around each one because they did seem to be a little bit loose in the center, and I didn't want it to fly up into the prop. And one thing I'm never really a huge fan of is these little tabs sticking out the side. I'm not a big fan of side mount ESCs. I do see that they have motor 1 right here, M2, M3, and M4, just as it would be in Betaflight. If you look really closely, you can see that on the ESCs themselves. See that M2 up there and the M1 on the very top of the screen? They are labeled correctly, but if it was my quad, I'd probably flip that ESC so that this was coming off the back, and you don't want these PCB tabs hanging out on the side. They are prone to breaking off. So immediately the first thing I did was take a couple smaller zip ties, and I went ahead and zip tied this off so that you don't want this battery flying off the bottom and pulling these 2 tabs off your ESCs. Now up in the front up here, it does have that sort of Furry Bee style Run Cam Swift clone. You can see it does have 2 little vertical carbon plates right there, and it's adjustable up and down. You can slide that up and down, that bolt, and it has a rear point for even moving this camera back a little bit further, but I found that I couldn't move it back any further because it was actually hitting the board right there. So I have the maximum amount of tilt right there that I can get. That's probably about 35 degrees worth of tilt on this frame, which is kind of okay for the way I was flying for the day. day. I was just kind of taking it slow and flying a little bit easy for you guys. But it is a nice lens on there. It is a 2.1mm lens, 1/3, and it's a pretty good camera because I have flown this one before, and it does hold up to some of the other Runcam cameras. But if you decided to replace this with another Runcam Micro Swift version 3 that just came out, you can definitely do that, because inside between these two posts, it will fit any micro style camera. Now also on the side up very top right here, that VTX is on top of that stack, I broke my LED display off because I put a GoPro couch up here, and I had actually a Foxeer, an old box camera, running on top of this with some TPU couch. And the problem was that when the couch, I had a crash and the couch came off the top, and one of the zip ties that was right here actually broke this display off, so it's kind of stuck in 800 milliwatt right now. But you guys saw this VTX on my channel earlier, and I did a short review in the FPV news just the other day. This is that R Charlance VX30, and it goes from 25 up to 800 like I was telling you guys, and it has that MMCX connector on there, which I really like a lot. But be careful if you're putting any type of couch on top of this one, because the frame is just a little bit narrow in the front, and if you have any zip ties near this little LED display, you risk breaking that off. Just be super careful with whatever you mount to the top of this quad, because there's not a whole lot of clearance between the VTX and the very top of the quad. And at first glance, we were kind of a little bit concerned about this hanging off the side of the quad so much, and I thought it might actually come out and hit this prop right here, but I had no problems with a prop strike on that MMCX connector cable, so everything is good there. It runs out to the back, and I was showing someone on my trip the other day, we were camping out in the mountains, and it has a vertical post back here in the very back between these two standoffs, and the MMCX cable actually goes through and it connects right here on that vertical carbon post. So that's really interesting that they have this little spacer in there, and then the antenna actually connects through there, and I bent it up, put a zip tie around it so it didn't fall back or wander left and right and end up in the props. Whatever type of antenna you're using on this quad, go ahead and bend it up and out of the way of these props, and maybe secure it with a zip tie. That's probably going to be your optimum setup there, so you don't have a prop strike on this antenna. And the frame itself actually looks pretty good. They actually have a little extension off the back end back here, and it does cover up the beeper back here and your LEDs, so it gives the antenna mount also a little bit of shielding in a crash. So it's kind of smart that they have this little extra bit of carbon fiber back here. It is a 220mm frame, and this one does have pretty thin arms, and it has those little motor bumpers out on the end. I'd probably like to see 3 out there maybe, but a lot of designs right now have these 2 motor bumpers. That's not a big deal, and I didn't have any issues with any kind of damage to my motors in some of those crashes. The only thing I had issues with during my flight test this week with this quad was a few rocks jumping up inside my motors and causing a little bit of mayhem during my flight video. And you'll see some of that twitching because of the little tiny rocks out in the mountains where we fly. There's a little bit of iron ore, and it's a really strange phenomenon, because what happens is with that little bit of iron in the sand, the motors actually, the magnets inside the motors attract the sand, so it actually sticks to the motor, and it's almost impossible to remove. You have to take the motors apart, which you can do with these because they do have a bolt in the very bottom of it, a little Allen nut right there, instead of a C-clamp. So that's one pro of these motors. If you do get sand in them, you can take them apart just by removing that bolt and cleaning them all off with a toothbrush, and it'll fly nice and smooth again. But overall, I gotta say, it's a pretty nice quad. It's also one of the first that I've seen come out of the GearBest line of quads that actually has room for running a 6S battery. So if you're looking for something that you want to run sort of higher voltage, a lot of people are liking 6S right now, and I think that kind of follows along with this trend for a very economical price, because this one is around $200 with 40 amp ESCs, 4-in-1 ESCs, and 800 milliwatts. So if you decided you wanted to fly this one long range, you could definitely do that with this one. You also have 800 milliwatt, which 800 milliwatts got me out there a few miles. So you can definitely do some range flying with this. Now, also included in the box is a little carbon plate that goes on the bottom of your battery, sort of protect your battery in a crash. You get an extra strap with it, and this is pretty cool. They give you a little tiny capacitor, even an extra one here for soldering on the back of your quad. And I'll just zoom into this a little bit right here and show you guys to see if the camera can get focused on that. So you guys can see that negative there on that side positive on that side, and it's actually going to be 25 volt, I believe. Yep, 25 volts and 470 right there. So nice that they also include this, and they include an extra buzzer. Why they included this, I'm not sure, but I really like the fact that they did include an extra buzzer. That really helps out a lot if you have damage to your buzzer on the back of this quad. And they also give you a rubber battery mat that goes on the bottom of the quad. I always use Velcro because Velcro keeps your batteries from flying off a little bit better than these. I just prefer that. You also get 2 sets of this 50-48 tri-props with this kit. I believe I got green and red, but I'm going to recommend that you guys fly the Cyclone props. They're going to just give you a much smoother flying quad right out of the box, and you probably won't even have to play around with the PIDs on this quad to get it flying nice. But like I said before, I think it is a pretty good value for this quad. It looks pretty awesome right out of the box. It did come bind and fly with the FrSky receiver already on there, and they already had zip ties and the heat shrink around the antennas coming off the top of the quad. So all I really had to do was bind up the quad. I left the receiver right behind the camera where they had it and flew it just like it came. But for around $200 for 6S quad, that's way cheaper than something like the Catalyst Machine Works $499 America frame. This one is definitely awesome on 6S, but you're going to pay for this one. So at the end of the day, saving $300. I'm not really sure which way I would go with that. If I wanted to fly a little bit cheaper, I'd probably go with the Stomer ST220. But right now, let's go ahead and go out to the field. We'll do a little bit of a flight test with it, line of sight, and after that, we'll do a little bit of FPV with the Stomer ST220. So here we go, guys. Let's go rip with this little guy. All right, guys, let's go ahead and fly this. I gotta say, right away, I had no problems with vibrations with this quad. I have had some other bind and flies recently that just had tons of vibrations on the flight controllers. The F4s are super sensitive sometimes, and they need to be tuned. And if you're gonna buy a bind and fly quad, you want something that flies smooth out of the box, because a lot of you guys don't know how to PID tune yet, and I understand that because it is pretty complicated. But it is really, really hard to PID tune some of these bind and fly quads out of China. But this one flew really smooth out of the box. I'm impressed that the F4 held in there. It didn't have a lot of vibes on the gyro, so everything was super smooth on my first battery. And this is the maiden flight you guys are watching right here. I had no problem flying it in acro. It was really, really predictable. And I'm also still in disbelief that this quad goes for around, I think it's like 220 for a 6S quad. Is kind of an amazing thing. And I'm flying the Gem Fan props on here as well that I showed you guys earlier. If you're gonna want a longer flight time, fly these props. The bi-blade props are gonna save you a little bit of battery life. It is still gonna fly pretty fast. You can freestyle these props as well, but I'm pretty impressed with the line of sight flight test that I had with this. I had no issues with it, other than later in my FPV testing, I had some of that iron ore and sort of sand get stuck up in the motors, and you'll see a little bit of twitch there because of that. That was kind of one of the downfalls of this whole review, but I'm very, very impressed with the power setup on this one and the fact that it can do 6S. So let me go ahead and put the goggles on, and we'll do some FPV, and you guys can check out some of the flights in this beautiful, probably one of the most beautiful spots of the entire year right here. Here we go.